Right, done.
Okay, everyone, I think we're ready to go. Thanks for coming along. Les Gade, our friend here, was 15 years old when the Warsaw Uprising broke out.
14 actually.
14, were you? Oh, sorry. 14, but I think he turned 15.
1930 vintage, so
and
about 40, but that's
as you'll hear,
yeah.
as you'll hear, it was one of the most dramatic, brutal, and brave incidents of World War II. It was cruel, it was brutal. The Germans were out to destroy the whole city of Poland, but the insurgents put up a tremendous fight, and even though at the end they had to surrender, even the Germans, they were impressed by the bravery they showed, and actually didn't slaughter them all and accepted them as genuine fighters. So Les is now going to go through, starting off giving you some background information about the background to how the uprising started, and then after that we'll get on to his own personal experiences during the whole traumatic episode. So Les.
Okay, well, thanks very much, John. First of all, a bit of a disclaimer, because over the years, every time I mention Warsaw Uprising, 44, people invariably ask me, Warsaw Ghetto. Completely two different things. The Warsaw Ghetto Uprising was in 1943. It was by a group of Jewish people actually desperate because they knew they were being slaughtered. So they said, well, might as well take a few Germans before we die. And this 1944 was actually originally to liberate or help Soviet troops to liberate Warsaw. It didn't quite work out that way, but we'll go into it. Do you want me to go on, or we'll show the slides first? Or?
Well, we'll start off with the initial slides.
We'll show a bit of
It's a bit of background information. So while Les is speaking, you'll be able to read some information about the back of the uprising. Okay, Les.
Yeah, when you finish reading, again, in Poland, it was actually a unique situation to any other occupied country in Europe by Germany, because in 1939, when the government knew the game was up, it was they decided to form a Polish underground state. In other words, organising the whole society from top to bottom, not only on the military side, but on the civilian side as well, because to actually counteract the Germans. Actually, the Germans were very, very determined to wipe Poland off the map, reduce the population to slavery. As soon as they walked in, they closed the universities, closed the high schools. Primary schools were only permitted to teach the basic 3 R's, and some of the technical schools, and that was it. And a lot of other scouting, for instance, was banned on the pain of death, actually, just being a scout. But by the same time, to counteract it, the Polish underground state organised everything from top to bottom, including the scouts. This is where I came in, because I joined it. I was a scout actually before I joined the scout, because being a reader, I got hold of a scout manual from pre-war manual, and I knew it virtually by heart before I eventually joined the underground scouting movement. Of course, recruitment was by sort of word of mouth.
Hi.
Somebody that knew you eventually decided that I must be reliable. That I can be a member of it. Then I was asked to join the scouting movement. Scouting movement, not from the word go, but assumed the paramilitary character, because from around about 15, 16 they started military training. Of course, it was all secret, mainly weekends going outside Warsaw in the forest and playing games sort of thing, but training. And any other lectures were mainly in the private houses. I remember, even though I was, apparently I must have been running, sort of speeding it up, if I can put it this way, because just in 1944, in the summer, I remember my first lecture on the German submachine gun. I was only 14. Normally they would only start about 16, so I must have been sort of speeding it up. And I still remember, it's stuck in my mind, I still know just about all about the Schmeisser submachine gun, the German machine gun. But that's a bit of a background. So this is where I came in as a scout. And of course, as scouts, anybody in the underground had to assembly points, because then again, we'll go into 1944. Everybody knew it was just about the Russians were getting close and closer. We're virtually on the outskirts of Warsaw, and that was only a matter of time. But this is where actually was decision. Even before, let's go back to the underground. They knew, like in 43 on the Eastern Front, the Russians started moving into, which was previous Poland, right? And the underground state decided that all the partisans would assist the Soviet troops on the back by destroying their supply lines, attacking them, trains, blowing up trains and all this sort of thing. And that was Operation Tempest, it was called. And Warsaw originally was not included in Tempest because they estimated that the Germans would probably not defend Warsaw and march out of Warsaw. So all they had to do is just take over the administration, and but the situation changed because I can tell you, 1944, July, summer 1944, Russians are virtually on the outskirts of Warsaw, and through Warsaw, from east to west, for a number of days, soldiers and civilians and trucks and cars, everybody running away from the Eastern Front. Everybody said, well, that's it, the Germans are moving out. But shortly, by the end of July, actually, the situation changed. The Germans started moving their fresh troops into Warsaw and decided to reinforce it. They asked for about 10,000 civilians to report to start digging trenches on the eastern outskirts of Warsaw. That was actually not reporting, was punishable by death, but only a few people turn up, but of course they're too busy anyway, so to follow up on that. But that was the problem for the military, because the situation changed, and if they don't organise the uprising in Warsaw, we'll probably finish up a spontaneous uprising similar to what happened in Paris, more or less at the same time. which could have been, disastrous results. So consequently, it was up to General Bull. I wouldn't like to be in his situation, when and how and whatever organise the actually uprising. But so we can. Yeah, okay.
So I think thanks,
a little
Les.
bit of yeah.
That's a bit of background. So I think we'll now start on your own
Yeah.
experiences that happened to you.
Oh, yeah, okay, yeah.
And here's an aerial photo of Warsaw being bombed by the Germans earlier on in the invasion. And you were living in a block. Everyone lived in apartments, I think.
Oh yes, yes.
And they all looked a bit like that.
Most of Europe people live in, yeah.
around the courtyard.
Yeah.
So tell us about what happened on that fateful day when your house was bombed.
Yeah.
And you lost your mother.
I lost my mother, and my father lost his business. We finished up with only what we had on, with 3 children and nothing.
What business did your father have?
Pardon?
What was your father's business?
A tailoring business, but he employed a couple of people, and they was doing quite well actually before the war. So because he was a master tailor, but like I said, it was a business. So not just he wasn't working for somebody else as a tailor. He had his own business, but the whole lot went.
And that was operated from a room adjoining where you actually lived.
Oh yes, it's a business. Yeah.
And you were all sort of in the cellar at this time, trying to avoid all the bombs, when a bomb hit a nearby building which fell on your home where you were trying to cook.
That's correct, yeah.
And she was killed instantly.
So anyway, yeah, father. Well, it's not part of the story actually, but I think it puts you in the picture.
So just clarify, 1939 you were how old?
1939 we're talking about.
Yeah, how old were you in 1939?
9.
9 years old.
1930 vintage, so it's easy to work it out.
Okay. Gotcha.
Which is in February this month. So
it was on the 27th when Warsaw capitulated, and the Germans had their victory march on the 28th and the 30th.
The Germans actually banned us, we couldn't go and watch them at all. We were not allowed to, not even, if you were in that street there, you're not allowed to look through the window. Technically, I'm afraid, because they could shoot you looking at the parade, because I think they're scared of Hitler being assassinated.
And here's some. The Germans were very ruthless. They killed people randomly.
Oh yes, well I can add to straight away. Actually, as soon as they marched into Warsaw, they arrested most of the university professors and some prominent people. Took them out the nearby forest and shot them without any trial, just like that. So that was just the beginning.
This is Liz's. Everybody had to have an identity card. Is that right? If you're caught without an identity card, you're in deep trouble.
Oh yes, yes.
And even school children like
Yeah,
you
school children,
had to have an identity card. That's your identity card for the school year 43-44 school year.
Yeah.
And that's for the following year.
Yeah, when I started in the actually in a technical college, it was my start, and started my apprenticeship as a radio technician in the German factory, working for the Germans. Well, we had to.
So that red card, that was for the technical college?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is a bit of information here about the Boy Scouts, which is a big part of the story. This Les, the Boy Scouts actually, Les will explain, were a preparation for military training in those days in Poland. And so basically you were all part of the Boy Scouts, and you had secret training at school.
Oh yes, yes. We sort of used to meet in either private houses. to a certain extent, I think the school principals were probably in because they allowed us to use classes after hours. So I'm sure they knew what for, but occasionally we used to meet in schools after school in classes and doing some training or lectures or whatever.
And this was all illegal. If the Gestapo caught you, you all would have been shot or sent to a camp.
Oh yeah, so if you're lucky or unlucky to finish up in a concentration camp, which is basically the same thing, because it probably wouldn't last long. Where do we go from here?
So go back to the previous slide. So this is the point where the uprising was called on the WWII, 1st of August 1944.
Right. Well, from the personal point of view, I'm in Scouts. I have my assembly point, and eventually on the 1st, which actually the alarm went up, or it started on the in the afternoon on the 5 p.m. I think there was a lot of people criticised that, but it's pretty hard to sort of work out where actually start an uprising, because the population was normally still going to work, and so they said, we'll start it in 5 p.m. more or less at the same time people actually returning from work, and they can go to the assembly lines. The other thing I could mention, it was summertime. A lot of young people were walking around with the long overcoats because they used to carry the machine pistols under there, hiding it. So it was a bit of a giveaway, but anyway, the fighting started. The firefight started before that originally, because possibly some of these Germans suspected people walking around with, what if you got under there, so we finish up stuff, you shoot first and all this sort of thing. So, but 5 p.m. they started in earnest, and our street where we lived actually was immediately under heavy fire from the nearby bank building, and they had the heavy machine gun mounted there and firing down. So obviously people ran away, and a lot of people finished up in somebody else's front yard or courtyard or whatever, because you run away, from the street when you're under fire. So, but immediately after that, imagine Warsaw actually saw blocks of units, and blocks of units were actually built in sort of hollow square, and had the courtyard in the middle. So people started punching holes in the adjacent walls, going through one block of unit to another, sort of to avoid going out in the street, which they couldn't, sort of looking for the alternative. And our unit we lived on the ground floor actually, and on the back of it there was a little garden facing the back of the unit from the next street. As if I try to imagine a little garden here, and there's a little window there into somebody's bathroom, about 2 meters up, and so people started walking actually through our unit into that garden and put a chair next to this window and going out there. That was one of the things, So a fair bit of traffic going, out through our place. Anyway, so that was first day. There was a lot of firing at night, and next day was actually the weather changed and was raining, but that's just by the way. what actually happened, I was in Scouts. My father didn't know. He didn't approve. And I wasn't physically scared of him, but I think I had too much respect for him, because he knew he used to say, I don't want to get involved in anything. I've done my bit in the First World War, like a lot of people who probably knew, grandfathers or whatever in the First World War. A lot of people didn't want to talk about it, didn't want to, and obviously he didn't want me to get involved. So there was a problem of how to get away, without upsetting him too much. Once I go, I go. Anyway, there was a girl there that got trapped in our block of units from a different part of Warsaw. And one thing led to another. She says, "Are you in Scouts?" I said, "Yeah." She said, "What are you doing here?" I said, "Well, I can't get away. I can't get in the street." And she said, "You know what we'll do? We go to that window there. You give me a leg up. I'll pull you up there, and then we'll go." And this is what we did. I ran away and then went round the block. At first, sort of baptism of fire, as it were. We had to run across the street under that machine gun. She ran first. I ran second. Went along and finished up going past the Hotel Victoria. And there's outside Hotel Victoria. Can you show that? And there's a fellow.
Slide on.
No, that's it there. Puts you in the picture, as it were. And outside there, actually, there's a fellow standing there with the white and red armband, and armed with the smicer, which I knew straight away because I still remember the lecture. And anyway, he said they need a runner in there. I didn't know what was inside there, so he can stay with us. So okay, I stayed there. Put me in the lobby. He said, "You just sit down here," and I actually spent the night sleeping in the lobby on the lounge there, waiting. And turned out to be it was the headquarters of the general that was running the whole uprising. And I finished up. I was a runner in the headquarters.
Can we ask questions?
Yeah. Sorry, we should have said it's an open forum. So
Okay, so can I just ask you, in this uprising at this time, is there Polish men of military age involved in this, or is it older men and younger men and women? What's the age demographic of the fighters, the Polish fighters, in this uprising?
Well, there was no age brackets or whatever. There was from anybody. It was. So as far as I know, this fellow was standing outside there. He was, say, in his 20s.
So had the Germans
removed? A lot of young people. There was a lot of young people because people were employed. People,
okay. Had the Germans removed?
Life went on.
Had the Germans removed the Polish fighting aged?
No. They did what they used to do.
Some elements of the regular Polish army, after the defeat, left Poland and joined the Allied armies and fought in North Africa and various places.
The Royal Air Force.
Arnold.
Okay.
The amazing thing is,
some of them were prisoners of war.
You do.
The ones that didn't get captured finished up as prisoners of war. But like in Poland, in Warsaw, people of all ages and.
Although you had to be 16 to carry a gun.
Oh yes.
So you weren't allowed to carry a gun. You were too young.
Hmm?
You were too young to carry a gun.
Oh yes. Well, for the reason I mentioned before, because Warsaw originally wasn't included in Plan Tempest. There wasn't that many arms around because most of the arms were out in the forest in these partisans. And talking about partisans, normally people think, there's a band of people sort of badly armed and badly trained somewhere hiding in the forest. There's divisions of them actually on the Eastern Front, on the fighting German.
Have a look at this, the map there, which shows the area you're talking about.
Hopefully I don't get not getting the virus.
Still close to me,
Well said.
So you won't be able to show on the map. This is the area you're talking about.
Yeah, but this is basically
This is
where
the
I
map of
finished
Central
up in the and that's actually the final thing, because before we covered quite a lot more.
I've just
area,
shown-
but this is actually the final.
If you go back to
before,
the,
Yeah.
before
We'll
the,
just go back a bit. This just shows you.
Yeah.
that's the area of that was captured,
captured,
at the
yeah.
first, at the early stages of the uprising.
Yeah, yeah.
The blue lines are the German advances.
German,
Okay,
yeah.
and you can see that the next one, in late September, that they lost a
Yeah,
lot of areas.
They started, eventually, well, from the military point of view, we'll concentrate on one part of Warsaw, eliminate that, and then next one. And the old town was the first one, actually, being really reduced to rubble. And what was left of them, actually, everybody heard about going through the sewers and whatever. The only way they could escape from there, they escaped to the centre of Warsaw through the sewers.
If you go to slide 16,
Yeah,
this shows the phase.
yeah, the different phases of it, because this one, when you talk about the again, this is civilians being massacred. Normally, if you read a book about Warsaw, most of the Warsaw Uprising, most of it's mainly from the military point of view, not saying what they did to the civilians. The civilians were in that Wola massacre in 2 days. I forget the exact figures, but probably at least 30,000 people slaughtered. You can't imagine, absolutely.
Slide 25.
And that was everybody, men, women and children. Piles and piles and piles of corpses.
So this is the man who
Yeah.
was mainly responsible for the massacre.
The skull.
And the following is a artist's impression of the massacre there.
Yeah,
That's
well,
the following.
that's just it.
They just went through and demolished as many buildings as they could.
Tell us about your running.
Hmm?
Les, tell us about your
Well,
running. Your job, your
okay,
communicator.
Actually, I had a pretty well. Talk about lucky in my life, actually, because I finished up being a runner, and most of it were mainly in the centre. Well, we'll go to this Hotel Victoria. Didn't last very long. Apparently the German intelligence was pretty good, because after a few days, the Stuka dive came over and had a go at it. Lucky sort of slightly missed. He only hit one wing of it. So the headquarters decided to move. They moved on to.
But it's just to go to.
Now this one I was hit in the back there in one of the wings. So we moved out of there to nearby. We got the.
If you go to slide 20. Just,
yeah.
That's the card you were given.
Oh yeah, but everybody had the ID card. Yeah.
And you were given that when you first went to the Victoria.
Yeah, go back to the next one. Now one after. This is a special one only for the people employed by in the headquarters. So I had to have 2. So anyway, you got the map there?
We're going to go back to the map, yeah.
Hmm?
Not this, roughly. So we finished up, actually moved out of there and moved into this building, which is a bank building before the war, quite a large building. And they decided not only the headquarters, everybody, even a civil administration, everybody moved in. And in the centre, actually, once the Germans decided they're going to concentrate on the outer parts of Warsaw, it was fairly quiet, if I can put it this way, except occasional bombing by these Nebelwerfer, as they call it, or snipers, because the snipers used to sneak in and somewhere and you're walking along the street and just as likely to get shot. But otherwise, it was quite pleasant. So, and in that building, half of my job, I was actually an office boy virtually, was running around the building delivering different bits of paper. But sometimes we'd be going out too. There was more than one. I wasn't the only one. In those days, I think there was about half a dozen of us runners. I was probably the smaller, youngest. Used to send us out in pairs, going out in the outer suburbs. So I think on the assumption that if one gets shot, at least another one will get through. But eventually we ran out of runners because I think I was the only one that survived the whole uprising without a scratch.
So we might go through some of the weapons that were used to try and.
Yeah.
So we go to start off with.
Sure, that's Nebelwerfer.
Slide 33.
I was petrified of that. As they called actually Nebelwerfer in German. It's a literal translation. Fog generator, which was a code name for it because it was a rocket mortar,
That's
a short range rocket mortar. And we used to call it actually moving cows. It didn't quite sound, it was screeching noise, so it was fairly short range. So if you heard this mooing, at least you had a few seconds if you could hide somewhere because you knew under fire because it was only short range. But that's the big one mounted on the half track. But that's the this is the sort of thing. 6 of them. And why I was petrified of it more than anything else because what they used to do, they had 2 different kinds of projectiles, high explosive and incendiary. So virtually prototype of napalm. It used to splash everywhere. And I was scared more of this, being seeing people being burnt by this. So I was really petrified that I got caught out in the once outside, but they missed me.
You must have been small then.
Yeah, that's right. Well, talking about small, yes.
When you were running, did you run messages?
Yeah.
Or did you take things? And how far did you have to run?
How
Sometimes?
far? Well, running, or not running, or walking actually.
Yeah,
But well, as far as I was concerned, it was mainly in the city.
Yeah.
I think they probably so I was small, trying to protect me to a certain extent, as it were. Because, well, talk about lucky. One day I'm walking along, but I was by myself then, so no witnesses. I have to take my word for it, and I had to walk across the intersection. And lo and behold, it was under fire. I didn't know by. I think it was a fairly small only infantry mortar. The bloke, I can't imagine just firing at random. It probably could see me walking there, and I fired only from here to that wall actually exploded, and I got stunned for just for a few moments. Nothing happened to me. I don't know, probably because the shot glass went out.
Did the Germans ever stop you when you were out doing these
No, I never went to it because there was quite separation. There was no Germans where we were.
Okay.
We didn't go into the German parts there because that wouldn't last very long. You know, to be up there. So that was virtually a liberated part of Warsaw. So it was all the Poles there, Polish flags.
Otherwise you would have been a target.
Yeah. Oh, a target from the, lucky enough, you know, from the snipers. The snipers were quite.
That's why you got the
active.
cart.
Yeah, that's
Les, this
right.
is the sort of
Well.
this is the sort of rubble you were.
Oh yeah, eventually, well,
You were running through it.
gradually finished up with rubber like this one. Yeah, you could hardly see where the seat was. So anyway, yeah.
Gary, do you want to?
Sorry, Les, if I can just ask you, Les, so to designate the Polish combatants, everyone just had a facade, is that
yeah,
right?
white and red. That was eventually it was accepted by even by the International Red Cross as a uniform, because technically we had no uniform, so could be shot. The Germans said, "Well, you're not a combatant, but yes, the armband." And a lot of people say, "Why on the right arm, not on the left one?"
Why's that?
Well, there's a lot of arguments, but this is my theory, if I can put it this way. First of all, going back to the Jews in Jewish ghetto, the Jews, before they put them in ghetto in Warsaw, had to wear an armband with the blue Star of David on the right arm, because the Germans, especially the brown shirts, is to wear the German on the, you know, with the Hakenkreuz, as they call it, the swastika on the left arm. So I think the Polish, whoever decided it, in sympathy with the Jews, we're going to wear it on the right arm. Another theory was that, which I don't quite agree with it, that you could see it, you know, a fellow firing a rifle or whatever, so probably a secondary.
Okay.
But I think the main reason for it was in sympathy with the Germans wearing, and this is what always sometimes you read about the yellow star. It was a blue star in Warsaw, at least. In Warsaw, the Jews wore a white armband with the blue Star of David. But it's just,
You got a slide 35.
yeah, this is actually that machine pistol was manufactured in underground. It's a Polish manufacturer, manufactured in Warsaw. Actually, it was called Lightning. It was all actually basically the same 9mm parabellum ammunition used by the Germans, the British, and the Australians.
It was a copy, wasn't it? The copy of it was a copy of the Schmeiser, or
No. Well, it's all basically a lot more simple.
Right. Yeah, but it would take their ammunition.
The stem guns were manufactured. The Polish stem guns or the British stem guns were manufactured underground as well. So we had stem guns, these lightnings, and the German, of course. You know, actually we finished up more better armed when they finished the when they started. But the biggest problem is always, a lot of people don't realise, ammunition and food. You start running out of that if you haven't got the supplies, so you have to give up. So this was the highest building in Warsaw. It was about 14 stories high. It was sticking out in the middle of Warsaw, and Germans were actually fighting. I think there was no point in it actually, because we never used it. We didn't have any long-range weapons at all, so for observation or whatever, there was no point of using it for any purpose at all. But the Germans, I suppose, trying it as a ranging, pelting the dilates out of it, the Stukas, I've seen it, everybody, had a go at it. And would you believe that building still stands? got renovated recently. It's a hotel. So they don't build it the way they used to. Just imagine after all this sort of entitled, you have any of those buildings.
Is it an Accor hotel? Maybe we can do a deal, huh?
Yeah.
Dennis can organise.
Yeah, that's right. So, yeah, that's the Germans made a mistake. At first, they thought they used the tanks as a sort of psychological, but in the urban area, especially with Molotov cocktails, you don't make that much there. So quite a few of those were destroyed. So eventually, I finished up standing there just firing, distance, not going into the streets, because lost quite a few tanks that way. So that was, at least we had plenty of petrol at first, Molotov cocktails, so it was very, very handy if you didn't have any other weapons.
This is the American airdrop.
Yes, well, supplies. Well, actually, even after first, I think it was the third or fourth day, at night, the British, which was, actually, they started off, I think it was a Polish bomber command, but manned by various mixed groups, actually different nationalities, and they came over at night dropping supplies, which one of them got shot down, and they at least utilised the machine gun from it. So the Allies used to come over at night and dropping. Just imagine burning city. You come over all the way from South Italy and try and, only have a few seconds, find an open space there to drop the supplies, but they still managed quite a lot of it. And one of the things, again, talking about the tanks, the anti-tanks, the British anti-tank, what the Piat, I think, P-I-A-T, Piat, which was very effective against the German tanks. So that came in handy, quite handy. But there's quite a lot of losses because they're coming over, flying all the way from southern Italy, over most of Europe, and especially going back, the Germans waited for them. The night fighters used to wait for them, and quite a few of them, unfortunately, got shot down. So, but
the Russians actually occupied one suburb on the eastern side of the Vistula River, Praga, but they did nothing. They just sat on their hands.
Yeah, well, again, going back before the uprising started, the Soviet fighter planes were quite active over Warsaw. Dogfights between the German and the Soviet fighter planes up in the sky. You could watch them there. As soon as the uprising started, clear sky, nothing there. So no response. The guns stopped. They couldn't hear the guns and whatever in the eastern. Eventually, in the second month, actually, they moved in right up on the eastern bank of Vistula River. But so they're sitting there on their hands, actually doing virtually nothing. In the last couple of weeks, actually, it started dropping a little bit. We didn't know who it was where the shot was. The Soviets, which were part of the Soviet, but they had one Polish division, actually, the Polish troops press ganged into a Polish division there, and they were over there. I reckon that most of it was coming from them, actually. The spotter planes at night used to fly over, very primitive. They sounded like my lawnmower, flying over there. But it must have been pretty game, and dropping the stuff without parachutes. And so a lot of damage too, because ammunition, they dropped a bag of ammunition without the parachute. About 80% of it's actually useless, but at least they tried. But from the Soviets, nothing. And I believe the general in charge of that Polish Kościuszko division, they call it, Kościuszko, the Aussies pronounce it. I think he got in trouble over that later on. But that's another story. But this fella, Bukowski, finished up when they, but that's another story. He finished up actually in charge of all the Polish military in Poland after war. So because all the top brass in the Polish army post-war during the was actually Soviet Russian officers. But that, just by the way, that eventually. About the American liberators. Only once in the second month of the fighting, during the day, I think it was about quite a lot, about 100 of them came over. Again, it was a pretty nice, clear day, pretty high, and started dropping parachutes. And some people thought it was paratroopers, but they wouldn't be dropping parachutes that high. Anyway, but there was a lot of supplies dropped. 80% of it went from the German side anyway, because they're just flying over there. Didn't even try to find a spot where they just dropped it there.
Good to say the Americans are still doing that.
Oh, yeah, they're quite good at it. Yeah, dropping bombs.
It's not
Multiplying everything.
It's quantity, not quality.
That's right, yeah. But did
I say that?
The Germans, matter of fact, when we were marching out of Warsaw, German soldiers standing by, and we're marching past, and they're holding all these weapons. Laughing. They got it from the Americans. But, yeah, how do you go about the time? We're getting close.
This is
That General Bukowski, actually, even though he wasn't running the uprising, but he was in charge of all the underground, so consequently he was in charge of all the military forces in occupied Poland. He had to sign the what's the word?
Surrender.
Yeah, with the Germans eventually. They, after a lot of negotiations and pressure from the Allies, they accepted us as the combatants. And the agreement was that anybody wearing white and red armband is a combatant. And consequently, we marched out of Warsaw to a temporary prison camp in a disused, disassembled factory outside Warsaw. There's no equipment, no nothing, but there's just a barbed wire around it. Put us in there. And as John mentioned earlier, I remember on the second day in the cage, and a car with a big speaker came over and is actually telling us that to volunteer to join the German military forces because we were betrayed by the Soviets. They didn't help us. So how about you come with us and help to get rid of this red devils, or whatever, not red devil, but red menace. But obviously, nobody volunteered.
Wasn't it a big feeling that you'd been betrayed by the Russians? Did many people think that you'd been betrayed by the Russians?
Yeah, of course,
But you still didn't act on the propaganda?
Yeah, of course, yeah. Because it's
So,
still,
betrayed by both
as I
sides.
said, that action Tempest was to assist Russians. And of course, this is only I found out later, but apparently fighting behind the German lines and destroying a lot of supplies and what have you, and helping Russians liberate some of these towns in the eastern part of previous Poland, they were quite welcomed by the frontline troops, but only if later on the NKVD would come in and start arresting people and all this sort of thing. So it was all political, you know, from the military point of view. We still treated the Soviet troops as our allies, because even as the saying goes, the enemy of our enemy is our friend.
Yeah.
Until
Les, did you have a nice room?
Oh yes, that's I finished up in that camp there, but not for very long. No, because again I was lucky. About 80 of us young folks were sent to further west to a small camp about 20 k's from Essen, which is an industrial area there, very small there. It was mainly the French, and the Polish prisoners of war from the 1939, a lot of Russian prisoners of war. So I spent most of the time. Yeah, after the war, we're still considered part of the Polish armed forces until 1947, when I was demobilized. But right up that, we're still in British uniforms with Poland on, and a part doing their military service and all this sort of thing. So still put in another couple of years in the military, in the British zone of occupation in northern Germany. So I think
And this is where your father.
Oh yeah, my father. Well, this is another point, that my father, because as I mentioned, he didn't want to get involved. As a civilian, he was taken to a concentration camp and finished up as virtually as a guinea pig, one of those that the Germans experimented on with different diseases and what have you, and he died about 6 weeks before the war finished.
So why was he interned? He wasn't involved in the fight.
No, well this is just it. That was my point, that sometimes for a long time I suffered from what they call a survival syndrome. Why my father died and I was involved, I survived, not a scratch on me, and I always had the lucky breaks everywhere, you know, so...
So how did he find out that you had been made POW? How did he find that news?
He didn't know.
Okay.
That I found out actually how it might. I had two sisters left in Poland, right? Because they were not in Warsaw, right? That particular time, they stayed in Poland, and I kept in touch with my older sister in particular. And the fellow that used to work for my father before the war, one of the fellows, was taken to Germany, and he stayed in Germany. Eventually he didn't go back to Poland and settle in Germany. And he actually found out from the Germans. Germans are very systematic, methodical, you know, keeping records of dug it all out and found out what actually happened to, he wrote it to my sister, and I found out from my sister what actually happened to our father.
So he basically died without knowing what had happened to any of you. So your father died without knowing what had happened to any of you.
No, that's right. No.
Even though he hadn't gotten involved,
He
tried to stay
knew
out.
I was involved in Warsaw Uprising, because that girl that helped me run away, halfway through, I went to see him. Actually went there and told him what happened, and I was too scared. Even though my father never put a finger on me, never physically, never punished me or whatever. But I knew, I think partly because if I go and see him, I'd probably stay with him. And then again, well, this is a lucky break, because if I did stay with him, I probably would have finished up the same as him, you know. So, but again, a lot of soul searching why I didn't go to see my father and all this sort of thing. But that's how it happened. Yeah.
I'm sorry, folks. Just one more question about your father then.
That's all right.
So, if he had a business as a tailor of some repute in Poland, did he make uniforms for German officers or anything like that?
Yeah, but it was all destroyed in '39.
Oh, it's just destroyed.
Nothing. Eventually,
Right.
what he did, we salvaged one sewing machine from all this rubble. Had it restored by a Jewish mechanic before they put it in Gade. And he started, doing bits and pieces by himself, as a tailor, because his whole business is gone, just like that, bang. So that was it. But occasionally, working as a tailor for himself, single, just to give you a picture of the situation in Warsaw, for instance. A fellow comes in with a bit of he wants a leather jacket. He's got the leather. He wants a leather jacket made. My father says, okay, so he makes him a leather jacket, comes in for a try, and a bit of leather left over. He says, oh, a bit of left over. Pulls out the gun. Can you make it for a gun? No, you don't know whether he's German or whatever. My father didn't say anything. Yeah, okay, so he did for him. Going back. But you never knew who was who.
So, Liz, during the whole time that Poland was a communist country, the government did not want to remember the uprising at all.
Yeah, but
it wasn't until 1983 that they finally commemorated.
Yes, that's right. Because this is what I didn't know why for a long time. Nobody, as I mentioned earlier, nobody heard about Warsaw Uprising. Everybody sort of assumed Warsaw Ghetto. But that was mainly being suppressed by the communist government. So people out in the West didn't know much about it, what was going on, and didn't know the history there, whatever. So now it's virtually coming out. So that's just about it. Any more questions or whatever?
Any general questions?
Yeah.
I had a question. During the uprising, you said you were a messenger for the general who was running it all.
Yeah.
What about was Warsaw divided up into sections with a commander of each section with troops under him?
Yes. Well, a lot of it was.
How big were those? Was somebody responsible for a suburb or a block of flats?
Yeah.
What was that sort of...
It was virtually divided, as said. Well, it's normal military sort of. Have somebody, if it's a big area, somebody, say, should be a colonel or something in charge of it. He's in charge, you've got majors under him, and majors have got normal sort of...
Yeah, so something like, thanks for doing that.
Yeah, that's right. So each
of those is a couple of blocks,
would have a fellow in charge of it, yeah.
Okay, and he would have several hundred or thousand people?
Oh, yeah.
It's at the centre. So the centre of the city is in that green there. That's the centre of the city.
That's the other map.
That's the other map. So they're the outer suburbs or inner suburbs.
I think there are about 8 different sectors right across the city, which all had a commander.
Robert, can you just go to the slide of the young lass in the German health, please, mate?
Yeah, well, we had no uniforms, so we utilised the German uniforms. Putting the.
So my question there is. So they recognised any combatant with the red and yellow band as being a combatant?
White and red, yeah.
White and red, so red and white, sorry. White and red. So were people like her executed for wearing German uniform even though she had the band on her arm? Like
well, the point was when it was all that we finished, nobody.
You got rid of the helmet,
You wouldn't dare to go wearing the German uniform.
Yeah.
No.
I imagine if you were captured with a German helmet.
It's a good point, but no.
Despite the armband, you would have been executed.
Yeah, because the Germans wouldn't be very happy about it.
I think many of those girls got captured.
It was very popular in the old town in particular because they liberated the SS stores, and as far as I know, the German SS were the first ones, at least in Europe, to wear camouflage jackets. and a lot of you see in photos and whatever wearing camouflage jackets. They were actually SS issue.
So was there a problem with Quislings, like with Poles on the German side betraying other Poles, I imagine?
Informers.
Informers on the German side?
Well, of course there are always traitors everywhere, but again, if you're talking about this, talking about the SS and talking about Poland, in Europe, if you're interested in the history, just about every country had a volunteer unit, SS unit, except Poland.
Oh, okay.
Yes, that's right.
There's no Polish SS, definitely.
Including
Wow, okay.
Yeah. But yeah, including Britain. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so definitely not, because actually, like I said, the underground state and any traitors against you mentioned that traitors. There's actually courts, underground courts. If you were a traitor, found out, you're sentenced to death, and that's the special squads actually to go and shoot the fellow, read him the blah blah blah. You've been sentenced to death. Bang! Quite a job. Matter of fact, Magda Szubański's father was one of them. Yeah.
He was the court, was he? He was the court, you're saying? Make the execution. He was the execution.
Wow. Any other questions?
That's PW, by the way. So I think the last bit I just mentioned. There's a lot of people ask me about PW. PW actually double meaning. First of all, actually as a trademark probably would be worth about $1 million. Very popular. That meant Poland fights in Polish, PW, or Polish Army as well. And because it's the anchor, sort of symbolizing that we stayed here, the Germans are not. So, and to let the Germans know that we're still fighting them and painting it on the street. You get shot for getting caught, you know, doing the graffiti on the wall with this PW.
So we've got a question. Okay.
I just wanted to ask.
Nice for a question.
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh.
No, you're right. Just wanted to ask. How did you get out and come to? When did you come to Australia? And how did
To
that
Australia. Oh, well, it was a long story. I finished up as a prisoner of war for 6 months. Eventually liberated by the British, and I was in the part of the Polish occupational force, and part of the British. Then we got demobilized. I decided I don't want to go back to Poland, and we were actually individually asked by the representative of the International Refugee Organization why and blah blah blah, and then got the refugee status. And from then on, like a lot of millions or thousands at least people in Europe, in Germany, trying to get out, and had a choice of going to the United States or to Australia. The decisions. Most of my friends actually finished up in the States, in the Windy City in Chicago. Thank goodness I didn't go there.
You're talking about New Poland.
Yeah.
I still have a friend.
Beautiful city.
5 years ago, the 7th anniversary of Warsaw Uprising, the fellow went, one of the fellows that went to the States, didn't see him since 1949. We met again in Warsaw.
Quite a few went to Canada as well, Les. Quite a few went to Canada.
Yeah,
That's right. Because I've got a mate who's a major in the Canadian forces, and his name was like John Muscat. He's like, hey, it's not Canadian.
Funny you mentioned Canada, because in the refugee camps, everybody was, because post-war, everybody was looking for workforce, right? Manpower. And advertising, come to, United States, come to Australia, sunny Australia, come to Canada. And Canada was the only ones that used to show that sort of coloured travelogues about Canada, how beautiful it is, you know. Oh, you can go hunting, you know, the canoes and all this. None of them were in winter.
Sorry, can we do one more?
All right, one more question.
I'm sorry, last one.
Last one.
So the decision by the Allies during the victory parades in 1945 not to allow the Poles to march, how does that resonate now with you as a Pole?
Well,
And the
now
Polish
it's well, I've got a good friend. He's a pommy. He's upset about it as well, probably more than me. You know, because probably feels guilty for his country.
Does the average Polish person talk about this still, or they just all forget the young?
Oh, now
young
it's
people?
after all these years. Well, let it go. But at least even at Battle of Britain was sort of diversifying, if I can put it this way. The input of the Polish fighters, you know, for a while, for a long time, was swept under the carpet. They were just mentioned in passing, but apparently recently some of the fellows from ARF admitted that without the Polish input,
Absolutely.
they could have lost them.
If I could just add to that, Les, you know, Wednesday of this week I was at Biggin Hill, you know, and I was in a group being given a brief on how the Battle of Britain came down to the fact that the Polish airmen that escaped were some of the best trained because they had been flying as professional military pilots since 1930, 1931.
That's right, yeah.
And it was quite interesting because there was a gentleman there who had some experience with flying with the Polish, I'm just trying to think what they call them now, the Polish Air Force in the RAF. And the biggest problem, and it has been shown on some movies, is that when the boys got up in the air, they'd only speak Polack, and the squadron leader would be trying to get them to regroup. You know. But they in 1940, if it hadn't been for the expat Polish guys, and a lot of them didn't speak English, but they could bloody well fly well, you know. And they were flying Spitties, Mark 1 Spitties. That's right. Yeah. And they had 2 squadrons in Biggin Hill of Polish, 2 squadrons, and they lost a few, but they took a lot of Nazis down with them.
A funny thing about language, they tried to teach them. Actually, they came up. I had a little booklet actually I left in New Zealand. I should have brought it with me. Basic English, about 600 words. They worked out. They can. You know, you can communicate, because the problem was the radio speaker. Now, if I was flying out there, communicate with it. So it teaches them, you know, basic 600 words, phrases, whatever, so they can communicate. Now, there's a bit of a joke about it, because they tried to get the British pilots to speak basic English as well, and especially the girl. You know, in the control, they're trying to talk to, and he's not answering for a while. He says, "Well, what's the matter? He says, "I'm trying to work out how to say it in basic English."
Well, can I take this opportunity just to thank Les for sharing with us, his personal memoirs, and it's been a privilege to actually hear from someone who was there, who experienced the tragedy, the trauma, and the devastation that we see in movies and read in books. But to actually hear from you, Des, it's a real privilege, and I know that I've learned so much from that. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Let's acknowledge John, who did a lot of research behind that. You don't know, but John worked with Les for most of last year. In setting up this presentation. There was publications done during the Reconnaissance, and we're hoping to do a little bit more as we get into, because as you know, it's